Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It is Dan and got another awesome show for you. And this is actually a viewer requested show. So a couple of weeks ago we were doing our live show that I do with my partner Lindsay called Boy Meets Squirrel, which we are live every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30 on this here fine channel. And one of the gentlemen that was interacting with us mentioned can you kind of help me out here? Because we were talking about lobbying politicians. I kind of went off on a rant, as I sometimes do. And he was asking, he goes, well, can you go in a little bit more detail about how to do it properly? How do we get get politicians, to pay attention to what we're saying? That sort of thing. And my guest today actually happened to be on that live also, and he's also been on this very fine show in the past himself. So I was messaging him saying, we got to do this, dude. And he's immediately responded going, yes, we do. So let me bring on my good friend and fellow troublemaker, Kurtis. Kurtis, how are you today, sir?
I am well, Dan. I am well. Session let out in Iowa in the middle of April. They're getting ready for election season, so it's going to be really interesting.
Time to hold their feet to the fire, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah,
Yep.
we were talking off air beforehand. North Carolina's wrapping up their session pretty soon. It's pretty much wrapped up. And I've been doing some lobbying myself behind the scenes. And nothing's going to happen because they're all up for election, and God forbid they ever rock the boat in election year. So that said, it's productive work that I'm doing, and I know that you're doing, because while nothing may happen in 24, I'm laying the groundwork for 25. And I think one of the important things that men struggle with is really how to do it, how to approach politicians, how to talk to them, and all that. So that's what we're going to get into. And we're going to go into pretty good detail. So if you've ever been wondering, or afraid, we're gonna kind of educate you and assuage your fears. But before we do that, Kurtis, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and let them know a little bit about you.
So I got involved in lobbying in 2018, and I think I told my story. It's the quintessential court screwed me over because I was male. Used the fact that I had a 10% PTSD rating from the VA against me. Got my kids taken away for 4 months. It's just one of those things where now that I'm 14 years removed from our divorce being final to now, I'm like, you know what? I have one grown kid and one kid that's almost grown from that marriage, and I don't want those two kids to go through it. Mm-hmm. So, and now that I've set a lot of that animosity and those big emotions aside, now's the time. Now's the time to go after it. So,
which actually, Kurtis, makes you an anomaly, believe it or not, because most guys get involved with it while they're going through a divorce. Mm-hmm. And they do bring the emotion into it, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about. You kind of went the other way a little bit. And I've been on both sides of it. I lobbied extensively when I was going through my divorce and fighting in family court for almost 10 years. But then, that all got put behind me. My kids, the youngest is 28 now, so I'm well past all of that. But I'm still out lobbying for the exact same reasons, right? I'm doing it for your children. I'm doing it for your children's children, because anything that happens now doesn't affect me at all. It's not going to change anything for me. But if I can get legislators, politicians to kind of see, hey, we've got to start addressing some men's issues in general, but things like family court in particular, because what's been going on is wrong. And as anyone who's got any kind of a reasonable thought process knows, we're in a little bit of trouble as society right now, and we're seeing the results. I'm trying to be kind here of what's happened over the last 50 years, and some of the things that
Fatherlessness is the leading root cause of what we're experiencing right here, right now.
couldn't agree more with you. I actually believe it is the cause for a lot of it. More so, you're saying leading cause. I'm saying it's the cause. I have done videos where I've traced back various issues, and every one of them goes back to fatherlessness. And you look at just what are we 3-4 generations in now from when this all started? Really?
Well, it depends on what time marker you're going to use. If you're going to use World War II, we're effectually 5 to 6. If you're going to use LBJ's Greater Societies Initiative, like a lot of people do, we're talking 1964 on. Yeah, you're talking 3 to 4 generations.
Yeah, I tend to use that myself, or sometimes I'll even go back to when they did the Reform Acts in 74, 75, which really created the family court system as it exists now. I kind of go to that. So yeah, we're looking at 3, 4, potentially 5 generations, and it's scary, man. It's scary where we're at, and this kind of lets me go with where I want to address first in this, which is, as someone who's lobbied, been an advocate and all that, when you're talking to politicians, legislators, and all that, the baseline question I always start out with is, are they even aware of the issues? What do you think?
Unless they've been through it before, the answer is no. And I can tell you that in the Iowa Senate, I have several senators on the Judiciary Committee in the Iowa Senate that have been through it. And hands down, no questions asked, they 100% agree with our position. They vote for our 50-50 bill, which is a clear and convincing rebuttable presumption. And hands down, no questions asked, that's what they believe is the right thing to do. When you go over to the Iowa House, I don't know what's going on over there. A lot of people equate that to the Wild Wild West.
Okay.
And that's just the dynamics in Iowa. It could be a bit intimidating at times, because you wouldn't believe, well, I'm sure you would, but an everyday viewer wouldn't believe that 1 or 2 people can really stonewall or gatekeep this one item.
It's something that we ran into in New York back in 2004, 5, 6, and 7, right? We were pushing for a shared parenting bill. A few other things, but primarily the shared parenting bill. And to your point, we had enough votes, both the Assembly and Senate. There's roughly 150 legislators in New York at that time, still is. We had 120 committed to vote, over 120. We had over 100 co-sponsor the bill, which is something we're going to talk about as we go in. If you're co-sponsor a bill, you're not going to vote against it because you're going to look like an idiot.
No. Yeah.
But it never got out of committee. Children and Families Committee had it, and there were 2 vehemently opposed people on it. One was a radical left-wing lesbian, and I don't say that as an insult in any way, but she despised men. She made no bones about it. She was very vocal about it. She does not like men. Your men are not even allowed to come into her office in the legislative office building. Her and Malcolm Smith, who's the head of the assembly now in New York, blocked it from coming out of committee. So here we had 3/4 or more of legislators saying, yes, I'm going to vote for this bill. 2 people stopped it. And again, it talks a little bit about to what you're talking about, which is people don't understand just how much power there is in certain positions. And committee heads, I argue, have as much power as the speaker does, because they will tell the speaker, I'm not letting it out of committee, and things like that happen. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing in Iowa. And I will tell people flat out, it happens across the country.
One of the things I see also is the speaker and the majority leader direct some of the committee chairs.
Oh yeah.
And because here's the thing, on first, second, third conversation on certain bills, those committee chairs are fully committed.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes up to subcommittee and then it goes to committee, and we're like, why isn't the bill getting brought up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you do a little prodding and probing, and you go, "Oh, come on, just shoot it to me straight. I don't want to hear the rigmarole. I don't want to hear the song and dance. Tell me who the problem is." Mm-hmm. And they'll straight up tell me it's either the majority leader or the speaker of the House. And it's like, okay, why are we blocking these bills in particular? And it all comes back to what we found statistically to be a personal bias based on, for example, that our current majority leader in the House believes in at-fault divorces. Well,
that's so 80s and 90s, Curtis. I mean,
no fault divorce has been on the books here in Iowa, in the North, since the late 60s. So
they were one of the first then when they started doing it. And what's interesting is New York was the last state of all states, as blue as it gets. They were the last state to put no fault in. It was like in 2010, I think it was, somewhere in there. So, and now there's talk in some states of bringing it back, that's a whole other show there.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting that they're bringing that up to you, and again, as you're talking to them, and one of the things I'm trying to set the groundwork here with the audience is to understand that they are politicians. They're also human beings, right? Mm-hmm. And they will tell you the truth behind the scenes if you know how to approach them. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. And you can find out the realities very quickly. And it can get frustrating. I know you've been frustrated at times because you and I have talked. Lord knows yes. I have many, many, many times with the whole process. And another point I want to throw out, and I want to get your opinion on this, because you'll often hear it's that side or the other side. Well, it's all the Democrats' fault. It's all the Republicans' fault. My opinion is flat out, it's both fault. Neither party cares about men. Neither party gives two craps about men. They're both catering to the women's vote, with men's issues in particular. So I am neutral on it, to be honest with you. I want to get your opinion.
So I agree with that. What's funny is here in Iowa, the Republicans in the House automatically cater to the domestic violence lobby and the women's vote almost immediately.
Yep, same in New York.
Now, in the Iowa Senate, however, they're a lot less likely to do that. The Republicans are in the Senate. And they're very, very, I would say that they're very conservative in their views when it comes to gender roles and their thoughts on claims of gender disparity. That's how they believe. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that there are Democrats in both the House and the Senate who support 50-50, but they feel that in order to avoid, because we're such a red state, that in order to avoid the appearance of divisiveness or being divided or fractured, they'll vote with their caucus, but behind closed doors, they'll tell me how to exploit the Republican side.
Yeah, I've run into that same thing. And one other final note before we dive into some of the good stuff here. We're talking primarily at the state level with these issues. But the fact of the matter is, it's really no different at the federal level, dealing with them. And at the local level, a lot of people don't understand that. People will think, well, if I'm going to lobby, I've got to go to my congressman or woman, or I've got to go to my senator at the federal level, or same thing at the state level. You know, states call them different things: their assembly, their houses, their whatever term that one is, and they usually have a senate on the other side. Not every state,
Right.
most. Same thing. The approach is really no different with either of those. But then at the local level, because I've been doing this locally myself, you have things like the mayor, you have city councils, you have counties, and all that. The truth of the matter is, it's really no different with them. The approaches are always the same in the sense of how you treat them, how you go about it. But
So
go ahead.
I'm actually a mayor in my little town here in Roland, Iowa.
I wasn't going to say that, Curtis,
No.
and I knew that. I was going to let you say it.
And our population is 1,381 people.
So you pretty much know everybody.
Yes, but here's the other thing that I'll tell you is we're in Story County, and Iowa's about as rural as you can get. We're not like Kansas or Missouri or Nebraska. Our big metropolitan area is just Des Moines, and in Polk County alone, they have 500,000 people. But we're one county north of Polk County, and we're in Story County, and the population here, I want to say, is only like 80,000, 85,000 people in the whole county. Now, what is interesting about that is I feel like the county supervisors and the city council and the mayors in our communities are far more approachable than any legislator at the state level or at the federal level.
Interesting, really.
They are very approachable, so much so that before I even got involved in municipal politics, our county supervisor, one of them, gave me her personal cell phone, and she wanted me to call her and talk to her about some of the issues we're having.
That is so interesting to me. Now, I have experienced similar, right? So, like, there's a councilwoman here. I do have her cell, and I've talked with her many times. But on the other side of it is I have legislators' phone numbers at federal and state level. So, but it's interesting. I think you have a valid point, though. I think the closer you are to where you live is how I like to put it. They are going to be more responsive. And honestly, maybe not so much on family issues as I'm kind of generalizing these. On other issues, your mayor, your city council have more power over you than the president will ever have. People don't understand that. They're the ones who set things like building your roads and stuff like that.
Yes. In order to get an ordinance through at the city level, I can push an ordinance through in as quick as 72 hours. It could take up to 6 weeks if it's a controversial issue. But, being at the city council level is it's almost akin to the British Parliament, when you have one political party almost in charge of everything, and you get so much legislation done. You get so much policy carried out. You get everything done that you want to get done. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for opposition, if you will. Okay. But, if you're worth your weight in salt as far as building good relationships with people go, you're gonna know what the cons to the situation are and how to address those, so you can address the concerns that your constituents have.
Great point. It's why I always say you have to, whatever you're advocating for politically, you need to go to all levels. And we're going to be speaking primarily on, let's call them family issues, dad's issues, mom's issues, men's issues, boys, that kind of stuff. But really, most of what we're going to talk about today applies to any issue. And that's where I'm going to lead it into now, where we wanted to go with this. So I guess one of the biggest questions that I think many people have had, and I did back in the day, is, what is lobbying versus, let's say, advocacy, right? Supporting something is one thing. Lobbying for it is another way I'll put that. What would you consider the differences, or are there any differences, Curtis?
Well, there are distinct differences. Lobbying is, you're basically educating a legislator, whether they be a representative or a senator, on the topics with the specific intent to change the legislation. Mm-hmm. Whereas advocacy deals more with educating the masses and people going and dealing with this stuff on an everyday basis, and a lot of times coaching them, and you could use it. Advocacy you could use as a two-way tool. You could use it as either how do you work within the parameters of the current system, or how do you effectively use that as a grassroots following.
Mm-hmm. So along those lines, I know a common misnomer that people have is that you have to have some sort of special education or something to be a lobbyist, or
no.
Go ahead.
No. So to be a lobbyist at the state level here in Iowa, I simply have to I have to watch a YouTube video that's an hour long.
Yep.
and basically make yearly reports. And for me, because I'm not a corporate lobbyist, I'm a nonprofit lobbyist, I don't make money. Mm-hmm. So the report I file is $0 made, and then that's it,
And I would always argue that makes you a true lobbyist as opposed to someone who's trying to earn a living doing it. And trust me, my friends, you can make a lot of money being a lobbyist.
Yes. So I'll tell you this: the corporate lobbyists that I do work hand in hand with at the Iowa Capitol, mm-hmm. A lot of them easily clear $250,000.
And I can back that up by saying I talked with a lobbyist not too long ago about helping me to get a domestic violence shelter open in North Carolina. The start was $125K. Mm. That's the first check, people. That's not. Now, mind you.
So
I don't have that kind of money.
Steep. Yeah, that's really steep.
That was just to get in the door with this lobbyist.
Wow. Okay. So so our lobbyists generally are. They're generally attorneys, or they're people who have political science degrees that go far beyond a bachelor's degree. It's just, wow. And I view it as kind of like having the attorney retainer. So in order to get my foot in the door with the corporate lobbyist, it was going to be $15,000 to start.
And some of it may be the difference in the states. I'm in North Carolina, a little bit bigger state. But also, when I was talking with the lobbyist, he's like, the reason you want me and I'm so expensive is I will get things done. And there's no doubt about that, doing the research. This person has one hell of a track record, which again shows you how much power they have. And this person has it at the federal and state level. So, again, you're getting, it's like anything else, right? If you need heart surgery, you could go to a GP and pay, whatever a copay is for a GP, but are they going to really be able to fix your heart versus a, heart surgeon that's going to charge you $500,000 for your surgery? It's exactly the point, right?
Right.
So you kind of talked about, corporations, nonprofits, because there is a different. Again, I'm trying to educate people on just the basics of things because people don't understand this. They have this. I talked to someone not too long ago. Well, probably about a year ago. About lobbying. He's like, well, one, I can't be a lobbyist because I don't have the training. That's why I asked you that question. We've answered that one. But also, it's like, well, don't you have to be in some sort of party or business or something like that? And I know what I answered, but I'm going to let you answer on that.
No, that answer is firmly no. I'll tell you what, it helps. It helps to be aligned with specific lobbies. It does. Specific organizations that do substantial lobbying, and it's really hard to kind of articulate because of the scenarios and the dynamics that play out here in Iowa. You have to understand, as a matter of principle, because I deal only with family law and I deal with specifically families, I have to align myself with conservative groups that, at times can be controversial because those same groups are the same groups that are lobbying for pro-life issues. And it could be one of the things that gets the liberal side of the aisle to walk away from you. Mm-hmm. So you have to strike a balance between what you'll speak out on and what you won't speak out on. You do have to you have to choose your words wisely. You have to kind of pick and choose who you talk to and what you're going to walk into and support versus I'll just abstain completely.
Yeah, I mean, having lobbied for men's issues and boys' issues, I concur completely, right? They will try, usually the opposition, will try and back you into a corner on a topic or issue that really has no bearing whatsoever on what you're trying to talk to them about. And the reason they want to do that is to discredit you, right?
Right.
So, in our case, they kept throwing abortion at us. And we're like, it's a non-issue for us. We're talking about the child's already been born.
Right. We're dealing with kids that are already here. That's what our focus is.
Why are we even going there? There's no reason for. Well, we want to know where you stand on it. I'm not going to answer you because it's irrelevant to the conversation.
I'm not going to marginalize one group of this faction versus the other group of this faction.
Yeah.
Our child custody issues is a Republican and a Democrat issue. Period.
Yes.
We have people on both sides of the aisle and everyone in between.
That's what's amazing about it, right? We kind of touched on that. Is both you have supporters in both parties and you have opposition in both parties. But that's what they'll do, and that's what I want people to understand is when you're going in and trying to meet with a legislator or one of their aides or something, you need to be prepared for that because if they don't like you, if they are opposed to what you're trying to discuss with them, they will try and get you off into the weeds by throwing things like that at you. And it's some of them are masterful at it, to be honest with you, right? There are some brilliant people that you're dealing with. And if you can be prepared for it, and the answer I gave a little while ago is exactly the answer I recommend to people, which is, and what Kurtis is saying too, don't go there. Just politely say, look, it's not part of the issue that we're talking about. If we're talking about shared parenting, let's say, abortion has nothing to do with that. Yet that was by far the number one thing they would throw in our face, other than domestic violence. That's the other one. Now, domestic violence, though, has a part in that, right?
Yes. But statistically speaking, when you deal with a custody case, roughly 32 to 33% of the cases that deal with child custody have some sort of domestic abuse allegation attached to it. Now, we found in our research that less than 10% of those cases are actually legitimate domestic abuse where they're not just having some sort of disagreement.
Yeah, it's funny though. You're saying 30. Maybe that's Iowa. I've been talking to divorce attorneys, in fact, right here on the show, and they're putting it at 60 and 70% of cases now.
Well,
it's a silver bullet.
It is, but I think if I could glean anything off of the attorney you had on last week, she had mentioned she felt like the judges were seeing more and more of it for what it was.
And they are. I think they are myself.
And they are. They
yeah,
are. Because
I agree.
And I'll tell you, I don't know what it is about here in Iowa, but if you were to go over to Illinois, it's a heck of a lot easier to get a domestic violence protective order over there than it is here in Iowa. In Iowa, the requirement is you have to prove that an assault occurred. And an assault doesn't mean necessarily unwanted touching, but if it involves a threat of harm, you have to be imminently and immediately able to carry out that threat. You can't just be 200 miles away and aimlessly make the threat. It doesn't work that way.
There are other states, though, and I've talked about it many times. The 5 magic words. I am afraid of him. That's it. You have TRO, right? Yep. You're going to have domestic violence restraining order put against you. And it's interesting, though, that I do think it is changing. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. And having talked with family court judges, in fact, I've got one I'm desperately trying to get to come on. He is reluctant because not because of me, though. As he said, is if I say something wrong or that I put something that's neutral, they're going to twist it and come back at me for it. You know. And it's interesting that it's the same thing that politicians will tell you is, yeah, Kurtis, I agree with you, but I'm not going to say that publicly because the blowback that I'll get is not something I want to deal with.
Here's the interesting part. The people that tell me that they don't want to deal with the blowback are people that are solidly in their own position. And because of where they're at in the state, they cannot be removed. It doesn't matter.
They're the worst ones, in my opinion. I feel the same thing.
And honestly, to be honest with you, they'll tell you one thing, but you send someone else over that they know nothing about, and they don't know that they're working with me. They give them a line about how I'm this awful person and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, you don't know this about me, but, and I know that I discussed this in one of our previous podcasts, but I happen to know military intelligence really well, and I know how to do open source intelligence gathering, and I also know how to do human source intelligence gathering. And all I did was send over an unsuspecting person from that person's district to them, and that legislator fed them all this information. Bam, it came back to me, and I'm like, got you now.
That's how you play the game, right?
Yeah.
It is a game. I mean, bottom line, it is a game. Which, speaking of which, we're going to get into the rules of the game if we can now. So, as I said at the very beginning, one of the reasons that we're doing this show is during the live, people were saying, well, yeah, maybe, because I was saying, guys, we got to get out and lobby. We've got to start speaking up and all that. Well, how do we do that? So let's kind of just start from square one, Kurtis. What would you say to someone? I'll just play the devil's advocate here. I'll play the innocent victim, joking, who's decided he's going to lobby, okay? So I come to you and say, Kurtis, what do I do? Give me we'll get into depth on it, but just give me the overall upper part. What would things that you would say to someone who's interested in lobbying?
Do you have skeletons in your closet?
Because they will be found.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Uh, what do you know about the issue that you're talking about? What research studies can you cite right off your hand, right off the cuff, and tell me what your issue is and why you could strongly support it given the current system? Okay. And then can you take those research studies and tell me how the law, the current law, or the current case law, for example, is deficient?
Mm-hmm.
And, what I found is I get a lot of dads, moms too, that can tell me how it was unfair, the situation that they were in, but it's only their case. They can't tell me anything beyond their case. And does that work? It works with some legislators, but if you're dealing with, say, the Judiciary Committee, they've got research analysts that are already trained attorneys that have been to law school, who've been doing statutory construction for 20 years and have really good relationships with the Bar Association, who automatically feeds them the line that, hey, guess what? 50-50 is bad. Well, is 50-50 really bad, or is it just bad for your pocketbook?
Bingo. you know, you kind of touched on the way I would put it, is you've got to find the way to combine facts with feelings.
Right.
Right. Stories are powerful. I have many times turned a legislator that was against, let's say, shared parenting around. Not by sharing just my story, though, right? Mm-hmm. There was an instance I'm thinking of, mind you, this is 20 years ago, where I was meeting with this legislator. They weren't adamantly opposed, but they were making it clear they weren't going to support the bill. And I said, tell you what, let me come back one more time, and I'm going to bring a couple of guys with me. And I just want you to hear their story. Mm-hmm. Give me 15 minutes a guy. Give me an hour total. I'll bring 3-4 guys. Okay. Right. Well, I ended up bringing 5. And I told each guy, you've got basically 5 minutes to share your story. We turned that legislator because he sat and listened, and I give him a ton of credit because, again, he was opposed to it at first, not vehemently, but opposed. And we would not have turned him without those stories. So it is important to share stories, but you also have to share the facts, right? Just willy-nilly stories are not going to do it. Your personal story can matter, and we'll get into that when you meet with legislators in a little bit. But you also, as Kurtis said, one, you've got to make sure you know what you're talking about, because the biggest mistake you can make is going in and trying to tell them the law says one thing, for example, and it says something completely different. You will sink your credibility instantly. But you've got to have that facts, feelings, and it's the balance.
One thing I'll tell you that I did is we had this legislator. She had primaried this previous legislator, and this previous legislator was a family law attorney. He was the one that was vehemently opposed to the 50-50 shared parenting bill. And Jesse and I had set up a time to speak with him in the local community where he resided. And we went there. We knew we had him lost in the first 5 minutes. So this legislator that had primaried him and won, we convinced her to go watch a trial of his and see how
brilliant
he was a snake. He was devious. He was dishonest. And the way he sold it for his female client. And she walked out of there, I am not even joking, she walked out of there disgusted with the judge and him. And the dad that we've been helping still lost. Oh boy, did he ever lose. But we gained a strong ally that day.
Yeah. That's a brilliant, I kudos to you guys for doing that, right? That's a brilliant way to do it. Hey fans, I just wanted to take a quick break from the show to remind you just how much we here at Men Need to Be Heard truly appreciate and value your support. And we'd like to ask you to do us a little favor. Could you take a moment and give us that like and share this video with your friends? And hey, don't forget to give us a comment and let us know how we're doing. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing great guests and even more content each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. It's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest discussions, interviews, and deep dives, as well as it helps the channel to grow so that we can continue to raise even more awareness on the issues men and boys face in today's modern society. So hit that subscribe button and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. All right, that's it for now. Back to the show. The thing I want people to understand is people don't like politicians. It's Congress's approval rating now. I think it's less than 10% now.
Oh, it's awful.
But yet people still vote for the same people over and over again, right?
Yeah.
People in general don't like politicians. Well, I interact with them all the time. I know Kurtis does as well. He is one. He's admitted it. And he's a good guy. See, they're not all bad. The thing I want people to understand is as we're going through this process, remember they are human beings, right?
Yes, they are.
There are some really good ones. There are some really bad ones, right? You're going to meet all kinds. My honest opinion is the majority of them are good. You know, there are some that are corrupt. There are some that are in it for the money. There's no question of that. There's some that got into it for the right reasons and then flipped and are doing it for the wrong. But the overwhelming majority, I genuinely believe, are trying to do what's best. And that's when you're lobbying, you need to keep that in mind, because it gets into, I want to kind of go into now how do you approach them, you know, what's the best way to do it, that type of thing, because that is critical. You know, if you're starting out saying, all right, I hear you, Kurtis, I'm going to go lobby now. And the first thing you do is say, get on the phone and start screaming, you're done. You'll cause more damage, right? Let alone if you go meet with them and do it.
Right.
So how would you, like, all right, if someone like myself, you're going to teach me how to lobby. So, you know, I have a decent background, maybe a couple skeletons in the closet. Make sure you make them aware of those, you know?
Right.
I'll give you a beautiful example. We had a guy who was great at meeting with legislators who had a domestic violence charge on him. He was arrested for it. He would come right out and say it. I was arrested for domestic violence, and legally I was guilty of it because I did shove her, right? Mm-hmm. Then he would get into the particulars of it, right? So he got rid of that, well, you were convicted of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was, but, right? So you can turn a negative around if you can do it properly. But how would you start someone, let's say someone was going to go do this, what's the way that they can start doing the actual job of it?
I would build the rapport first. I would, you know, Roseanne, our friend Roseanne, she has this wonderful phrase, defang the argument. So if you do have skeletons in your closet, say, hey, you know what? I'll give you my example. My ex-wife filed 5 civil protective no contact orders against me, and you go into them and they all say dismissed, right? There's never a finding of domestic abuse. There's none of that stuff, but they're there. So when you have it in a cumulative effect, it's hard to avoid that feeling of, was there something to this? Now, where I like to lead into is, hey, you know what? When you're talking about divorce and you're talking about such feelings that are strong emotionally, you know, is it possible that feeling of betrayal could overcome you? Is it possible everyone could be feeling all of these sensations? And, you know, you look at it with me, 14 years removed, I can tell you right now, my ex-wife, we're not best friends by any means, but I'll tell you what, if something comes up with the kids, call is put in, she answers, hey, what's up? Hey, I just got a little alert. well, just yesterday, I got an alert on my phone that says Nolan dial 911, and she goes, "Oh no, does it tell you where his location is?" I tell her the location. She's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna see if I can figure out what's going on. Will you give him a call and blah 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 blah?" Okay. You explain how everything is kind of transpired from where everything was really acrimonious and horrible to, hey, you know what? She paid for the oldest senior pictures. I paid for the catering for the senior party or the graduation party. And that's how we split the cost with stuff. And that's how we work together to prioritize our kids first. You're not going to get there overnight. What we want to do is we want to help parents get there quicker, and we want to help parents get there and heal faster. And I want to be able to take that opportunity with you, the legislator, on how to do that. I just took my story, defanged everything,
Yep.
boiled it down, and got you the silver lining in nothing but in less than 5 minutes.
I was going to say, that was masterful. I knew exactly what you were doing as you were doing. I was kind of chuckling along with it. But the key point there is there's an example of using a story, but then trying to go from there into facts, right? This is the reality that we're dealing with. And the other point, a very key one I want to make is if you're running into something where you potentially have an issue in your past, don't lie. Honesty, integrity, it's all that. Right? If you come right out and say, as Kurtis said, well, I had she put 5, allegations against me. I'm not denying that she did that. Here's the reason why they weren't valid. You've just diffused all of that.
Right.
And inevitably, they are going to look. If you get deep enough into the weeds with politicians, trust me. Well, they themselves aren't. Their aides are going to be looking. They are Googling you. They are doing everything.
Facebook, Instagram,
you name
Snapchat, TikTok.
They will, in some cases, pay people to go do research on it, because I've had it done to me, okay? And I'm certainly not perfect, but I always said, here was my situation. Defang it, as you put it, and move on, and you get rid of that. Honesty and integrity, though, those are, in my opinion, the two biggest things that we have in our favor, more so, I think, than the women's groups, because they are very much not honest, and they will pull statistics that are complete fallacies out. And if you can honestly sit there and, because I've been in debates with them in legislators' offices, in committee meetings, when you can counter that through honesty. Look, so-and-so, whoever the representative is, I hear what they're saying, but here's why it's wrong. And then you relay it with a story. Yeah, you've blown them out of the water.
I carry the 1989 Massachusetts Supreme Court gender bias study with me, along with the Florida State Law Review from 1998, and then that other one from 2005, where it literally takes a statistical analysis and it applies research standards that you would find in statistics and shows how they couldn't arrive at that data. And I always have a copy of those 3 things just for that purpose.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's because you're going to run into that, right? We're just trying to educate people on, so that you prepared when you go in, because
the Iowa Coalition for Domestic Violence has stopped referencing those materials.
Yeah, well, my big enemy back in the day was NOW, National Organization of Women. They've kind of disappeared in large part because of a lot of their dishonesty, right? One of the things that you will find, and that's why I'm hammering this point home, is if you are dishonest, you lie. If a politician or their aide finds out that what you're saying is not true, you'll never get back in their office. I'll tell you right now. And it can make or break your issue, right? If you go in there, anger's the other one, right? If you go in, and we're going to get into that a little bit, like your demeanor and all that, but honesty, integrity are key, and then your demeanor. So let's kind of go there, Curtis, since I opened that door. If you're going to call a legislator, if you're going to go in and meet with them, why don't we get down to even the basics? How should you dress? What should you do to prepare?
So
The whole gamut, I guess.
When you're dressing, I believe in a button-up tie, blazer. There's this one lobbyist who is a corporate lobbyist. He makes quite a bit of money, and he never wears a tie. He always wears blue jeans and a blazer, but he's the only one. And I think a lot of people let him have a bye because of his age. Mm-hmm. If you want to have success, you need to look the part, yes. But I think that there's also, if you look a little out of place doing it, that's really good too.
You just stole my thunder.
Because I'll tell you this. I've had some success with some like last minute subcommittees where I've got dads in there with mud on their boots, covered in their work jeans and their shirts, and they're in there and they're giving their story. And there's something about that quintessential blue collar look that screams, I provide.
You stole my thunder, Curtis. So let me talk about appearance a little bit from my perspective. There are times majority of the time I would wear a suit if I was going to lobby. It was also because I was lobbying on my lunch hours, and after, I would take an afternoon off and go up and do it, and I was in a suit at the time. There were times I would go in dressed like this with a polo shirt on. But to your point, if I was bringing guys in to tell their story, I might be in the suit, but I would tell them, dress as you would for work. Mm-hmm. That was the key, right? Now, does that mean, mud I get, but, you don't shower for a week and, your hair's... No. Presentable, right? Make sure you showered, because as I'm sure you've seen, there's sometimes people are in there, they haven't showered and all that. It's like, oh, no. But I always told the guys, dress as if you were going to work or had come from work, because that is something that will resonate, right? If you're sharing a story, I've shared my story, where I had the guys coming in and share it. I told all those guys, just dress as you're coming from work. And most of them were coming from work.
Right.
I was in a suit, however, right? There's times and places for everything. The key point is presentable, I guess is the way I'll put it, which I know is a kind of a generic term, but, I don't have any, but comb your hair, neither do you. Don't come in with your hair all, crazy or whatever, unless, however, one guy wore a hard hat. His hair was hard hat hair, right?
Right.
But he said, I just came from my job, and that's the other thing. You tell him, I just came from my job to meet with you. You can turn that. I'm sorry I have mud all over my clothes, but it was so important for me to have this opportunity to meet with you and talk about my issues that I made sure that I came straight from work, because it was a priority to me. What's a legislator going to say to that?
Well, and the priority and that sense of importance goes both ways, right? Yeah. Because, hey, this guy wanted to meet with me, felt I needed to hear his story, and the other side of it is he's sharing with me why his story is so important, and the priority goes both ways.
Yes,
it's a two-way
exactly.
street.
And that's we're getting into the key part of everything. So it's called building a relationship, right?
Yes.
I think the most important lesson anyone can take from watching this show is it's all about the relationship. You have to build that relationship. And there may be some instances where you become friends. There are legislators I went out to dinner with back in the day, became good friends with one, very good friends.
Yep.
Our stories were very similar, and he ultimately became the head of the Republican Party in the Assembly. I don't think Brian's still in there, but he was at one point. Really good guy, right?
Yep.
We built that relationship. I've talked about the other one. Deborah Glick was her name. Despised me. Despised every man on the planet. I wasn't going to have lunch with her. That wasn't ever going to happen. But we had an adversarial relationship, but I always treated her with respect.
Yes.
I had no respect for her. I still don't. I will tell you that right now.
Well,
but she is an assemblywoman. She deserves respect.
So I'll tell you that I have had a substantial amount of, I'll call it acrimony, with one
I know you mean.
representative in particular. And, he knows that I make no qualms about where I stand with him. You spend 5 years making promises to us as a lobby, and you don't follow through with your word. And then you come back and you say, well, this is all I could get through the committee. Okay, I know that's a lie because I've already surveyed your committee. Everyone's already telling me where they stand on the issue. Unless you've got 21 members lying to me, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. And this is the same representative that, we've sent a lot of people from his district in to talk to him. And, one in particular said that when he spoke with him, this particular representative said, well, I know he's on VA disability, and I think he's faking his disability. And I'm like, oh, so, like, okay. I'm like looking at this going, okay, let's just look at the years of documentation that I have in medical documentation alone, and the occurrences that we've got well documented in my military record. None of that stuff was lied about at all. Just because I can beat your pants off with my arguments at 90% of what I was, just means that if you met me at 100%, you would never be able to deal with me at 100%.
And the takeaway from that, Curtis, is it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They will look for something.
Oh, yes.
And they will try and bludgeon you with it. And you need to be prepared for that. But then turnabout's fair play at that point, right? So we talked about, showing them respect, treating them properly. When they get to that point, or like I've talked about when I run into with Glick, gloves come off at some point. Now,
yes,
let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because that does not mean you become a raving lunatic or make threats.
Nope.
And this, as far as men's issues go, this is the biggest one that's out there, in my opinion. I want to get your opinion after I talk about it. What I have seen men do, and to be fair, some women who are lobbying for men. And by the way, the women are better lobbyists than men, I'll tell you that right now. But some of them, their emotions will overcome them, and they will lose it.
Yes.
They will make threats. I'm going to get you. I'm going to, Now, you can go in and say, I'm going to affect your, we're going to have somebody primary you. I'm going to, get you out of office. You got to be careful how you say it, but that's fair game. Making an overt threat to hurt someone, or anything even remotely close to that, you've just sunk not just you, but your entire
lobby,
everybody. And that is why men are where they're at, because unfortunately, it happened to us in New York, where, we had a group of about 80 people. 2 of them went nuts. They were great at the beginning, but they went nuts, right? And I'm not faulting them in the sense that they snapped mentally. I understand why they
Yes.
snapped. I don't fault them for snapping. I fault
Yeah.
them, though, from then using that and going in and making, I mean, serious threats. It derailed everything for us.
Oh yeah. So one toxic personality
That's all it takes.
can it can burn Rome in a day.
Yep.
It can burn it to the ground in a day. It doesn't take much to bring down what you've built. I will tell you that we lovingly refer to it as the scorched earth model. And that model is not conducive for long-term results. You might get that short-term that short-term instant gratification feeling, but extrapolate it out, okay, a year later, whew, you can't get an appointment with anyone.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to listen to you, and you've just burnt everything to the ground. So what I chose to do was, with this particular representative, it's been difficult because this particular representative holds a very powerful seat. He is a committee chair and he holds a very powerful seat. He knows who he is, but the thing about him is he has a lot of enemies, even within his own party, even within the House. And so, you know what I do? I just network those people, those people that just would love to see him go. And you know what? They'll do the work for me. I don't. You give a person enough rope, they'll hang themselves. Yep. So I don't ever lie, and I don't ever focus on minuscule stuff. That's not what we do. If I'm feeling very strong emotions, specifically anger, it's best to walk away from that particular topic for several days or a week or more. But if it's an issue that needs to be addressed like right now, guess what? I'm delegating it to someone who I trust has no emotional attachment to it. So I'll tell you this, we've got some older males who are in their 50s that they handle those issues if I'm having an emotional moment where I'm going, okay, I can't approach this with anger on my mind, or I'll take it and I'll put it in the lap of a female that could handle the issue just as easily as me, but can do it without being angry about the issue. They can do it objectively, focused, and they can apply the right amount of emotion and the right amount of logic to their argument in order to make it as powerful as possible.
That's why I've always argued that women make better men's rights activists than men do, because they are better at doing exactly what you said, applying the right amount of emotion. And they are better, honestly, at keeping their emotions in check with regard to that, right? Guys come out of family court and go lobby. We would tell, no, you're not coming today, right? Or they had a hearing coming up or something. You got to get them out of it, because
you almost need them to have 3 to 5 years off.
Pretty much, right? I mean, there are exceptions, and not to toot my own horn, but I was really good at separating my emotion. I always equate it to, if you're in family court, you got a judge in front of you. You start screaming and yelling at the judge, you're screwed. Mm-hmm. Treat him with respect. You can be angry at him, don't show it, right?
Is it, I think, Father X 2022?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to be doing a whole series of videos with him. Yes.
That guy is how men should be at trial. I'll tell you what, for the court cases I do help out on, if you could have a male that in control of his emotions, holy buckets, we would get so much further. but it's so counterintuitive too. So
now Kurtis does not know this, but he just gave me a promo for the next 4 shows after this one is with Father X. We have recorded 2 already. We are recording 2 more. And we're going to be walking through all that because a lot of what we're talking about applies in family court as well. It's, you know, right, how to approach things and all that. So let's kind of talk in, again, we're trying to help somebody who's never lobbied before. You know, we've talked about how to dress and all that. You know, have your facts, understand the feelings. But let's talk a little bit, if we may, about how it kind of goes. And it will vary, but in general, I'll start off by saying you're probably not going to meet with the legislator unless you've been doing this a while. If this is your first time, you're going to get an aide more than likely.
Well, it depends. It depends on a few factors. What I'll tell you is if you pay attention to the movements and who's on what committee. Mm-hmm. Okay. Most of my bills go through the Judiciary Committee in both chambers. However, if there's a particular legislator that I cannot get in touch with, what I'll look at is, okay, is this legislator on a different committee? I'll look it up, and all of that stuff's online. Okay, so this one happened to be in Ways and Means, and I knew that this particular legislator would always be at the Ways and Means committees. Well, okay, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm planting my butt right outside the Ways and Means Committee, yep, and I'm waiting for this puppy to walk right out because guess what? He knows I'm waiting for him. As soon as he sees my eyes, he's like,
oh, crap, not again.
I can't hide from him now. Well, guess what? I know you have to go to this committee, and I know you have to be here, and you're not going to be able to get out of this. So guess what? Well, I'll tell you what. You know what? I built a rapport with him over 2 months. Mm-hmm. And then one time what I found was he knew that this other legislator that's a committee chair was watching me really closely and asking other people to watch me really closely. What he would do is he would park around the corner to talk to me. And he would talk to me there, out of sight, out of view from everyone. And he agreed that, the problems that I was running into was almost exclusively instigated by this one representative. And that if I could get my bill through another committee, he knew it would get through, it would go to the floor for a vote, and it would pass overwhelmingly.
Yeah, the key point that I want people to take away from that is you built the rapport with them, right?
Yes.
And that's your whole goal with all of this. If you're going in and meeting with someone, right? Honestly, the majority of the time, if you're just starting out, you are going to get an 8. I mean, at least in my experience. And you know what? That's not a bad thing.
No. Right? The aides can be more influential.
Oh, God, they have more power than the legislator does. I've seen it where because they're the aide for X legislator, but they know all the other aides, and they will get you into the other ones, and that's how you really start getting power.
The one thing I want people to take away is this one powerful representative that is a committee chair. Okay, I have a bad relationship with him. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that that bad relationship is only extended to 2 other representatives out of the 100 that are in the House. Mm-hmm. Everyone else, they don't care about those relationships over there. They love who I am as a person because I built a good rapport with them.
Right.
You know what? Just because this guy over here, he's just notoriously difficult to work with. Everyone knows that, but everyone knows that they got to get it in order for a lot of stuff to get through. He's got to align with you. Well, I mean, there's a lot of brown nosing at that point.
Yeah, you have to understand the dynamics in any of these bodies, right?
Right.
To go up to the federal level, just temporarily. If you want to get something through the Senate, whoever is, right now it's Chuck Schumer. He's the head of
Right.
it. He's the only one that's going to put something to a vote. If he doesn't approve it going to vote, it ain't going to vote. Same thing on the House side with Johnson, right? That's who ultimately has the power. It works that way at the state level for the most part. But you've got to build your allies, because even if, let's say I'm just going to use Schumer because him and I had some battles back in the day. I have no respect for that man. Oh, God. He was a New York State legislator back in the 80s. He has a well-deserved reputation that he's never met a microphone he doesn't like. And I would call him out many times. And now, mind you, he was at the federal level, but I was also, primarily lobbying Senate or state. But because he was in the Senate, he had some power, right? And he could influence things. And he is no fan of mine, and I'm no fan of his. But to your point, I started getting some of his allies to support what I was talking about.
Right.
And they fought the battle for me. So he despised me, right? Now he probably won't even remember who the hell I was because he's so far up the ladder now. But when you can run into that, you want to build your base. It's just like a politician wants to build their base to get reelected. If you're lobbying, you want to build your base. If you're just starting out, the first place you want to go is your legislator, right?
Yes.
So at the state level, I don't know if it's every state, but the majority of them, there's going to be a Senate, and they'll either call it Assembly, House, or some variation of. You want to meet with your local rep for both of those. And what you want to do is call their office. And you want to say, hey, I would like to come in and speak with someone about, I'm going to use shared parenting, about shared parenting. If there's a bill out there, go find the bill number. It's bill number 1234. I want to come in and meet with you or someone in the office, because you don't want to say, I will only meet with the legislator, because they're going to go, well, he doesn't have time to meet with you. Sorry. Go ahead and meet with the aide. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you may get farther that way. I want to come in and meet with you about bill number 1234. I would like an hour of your time. However, I understand you're busy. Can we get something up to an hour? Very polite, very professional. They'll almost always give you that hour. Not always. Sometimes they'll go, well, if they're in session and they're doing budgeting, you also got to time your call.
I got 30 minutes for you. This is all you can.
And that's fine, right? Then your reply is, I'll take it. Thank you so much. I'll see you at 3:00 next Tuesday, right? Or whatever it is. Ask for the hour, but take what they give you. It might be 15 minutes. I've had times where it was 5. I took that 5, right? And you just go in and you say, thank you for meeting with me. If it's an aide, I appreciate that, the legislator is busy, but I know that you're going to relay everything up to them, because they will. And then present your case. Have your facts, have your feelings, present your case. When you're done, thank them. Shake their hand. Think of it like a job interview almost.
Right.
Then follow up. The mistake a lot of people make.
Following up is huge.
It is the most important thing. Because if you go in, meet, and walk away, you're nobody.
Yep, but it keeps them accountable, keeps you accountable, shows that you're interested in your issue. And guess what? They're like, oh my goodness, this is a priority for this person. And they're on top of their game. And it's pretty obvious who's paid lobbyist and who is a volunteer lobbyist. I'll tell you that right off the bat.
Yeah,
it's very obvious. So they'll go, wow, he's not getting paid at all, and he's coming in and he's doing this day in and day out, and he's going, wow, you know what? That takes some dedication. That takes some heart. This guy's put together well. Let's see what we can do for him.
And they'll start opening doors for you then.
Oh yes,
right?
Yes.
So your follow-up is going to be, let's say I met with an aide or the legislator. Hey, can I have your email? There's a few things I couldn't cover, and I know your time is busy.
Right.
Let me email you some things. I have never been told no, ever. Right. Doesn't mean they're reading it. I know that, but they will, because you can go get their email online too. But you're building that rapport with them, and then you send them a thank you. Thank you for meeting with me. Here's a synopsis of our meeting, and here's some of the things I couldn't get to. Wait a few days. Hey, I just thought of something else. This was one of my tactics. Jeez, I forgot about something. Can I pop over? I work right down the road because I work 3 blocks from the New York legislature.
Right.
I'm going to be over there because I'm meeting with so and so, or can I just pop over and drop this off?
Right.
Sure. I would go in. They'd be there. Oh, thanks so much. Hey, blah blah blah, and I would get another meeting sometimes right then and there.
Right.
Or I would say, well, sometimes I'd say, I don't have a lot of time today. How about we book another time that works for both of us? And then you get a second meeting. That's how you start building the rapport. Then you go back to them as you've done this, right? You've got that relationship you're building. Oh, I need to go meet with Jane so-and-so. What do you think's the best way to do that? If it's the legislator, they'll go, I've had legislators pick up the phone, call their office and say, I'm sending Dan over to meet with you right now. Give him 5 minutes.
Right. Another thing that I love to do is in the off session, I'll drive to their hometown.
Hell yes.
I'll drive to their hometown.
You just brought up a key thing, Kurtis, right? And this is more so at the federal level, but it's even at the state. Get them in the home district. Mm-hmm. If you're going to meet with them, I'm in North Carolina. The legislature's in Raleigh. It's a 2.5, 3 hour drive for me. Mm-hmm. And I meet with them. That's awesome and all that. And they appreciate that I took the time to do that. But then when I follow up and say, how about I come to meet you at your district office? Because once they're away from the legislative building, say that 3 times fast, they're more relaxed. You're going to get more time. Mm-hmm. You're going to get more attention paid to what you're saying. Federal level, same thing, right? If you ever have an issue and you want to talk to your congressman or woman or your state, my case, I have 2 senators, just like everybody does, but I'm trying to meet with one of my senators, Tom Tillis, right? Mm-hmm. Who, again, he's not local to where I am, but that's exactly what I did, is what you talked to.
Right.
I will come to your local district office, wherever that might be, the closest one. Again, I'm going to get an aide, most likely. I don't care. You're showing that you're making that effort. You're building your credibility.
Yes. What I love to do is, in Iowa, they have aides, yes, but the aides are usually like someone that's already working for them outside of the legislature, or if you've got like someone like Senator Julian Garrett, who his aide is his wife, it doesn't matter if I get Senator Garrett or his wife, they're both talking.
You better believe it.
So, yep. It's one of those things where I go and I have a conversation. Oh, you were in the military? Well, yeah. Oh, well, my nephew's thinking about enlisting. What do you think about that? Blah, 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 blah. And it opens up all of these other like rapport building items.
Yep.
And then they go, well, what are you by trade? Well, by trade, I'm a paralegal. Oh, my other nephew's going through a divorce right now and is having a heck of a time with child support. What could you help me with? Or, and all you're doing is, hey, I know a great attorney in that neck of the woods. Here's who I would look up.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, bam, someone from my attorney network gets business. 1, 2, because I'm very stingy on who I put on my network list. I know that attorney is going to take really good care of this client, and this client is a relative of the legislator I'm trying to build a rapport with. And then all of a sudden it's like bam, 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 and it's a domino effect with all this cascading out, and before you know it, it's like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how much help you've provided me with this. And I'm like, all I did was make a few connections for them, put in a little bit of work, and I was Johnny on the spot.
You solved a problem for them, which now subconsciously They now have to solve your problem for you, right?
It
It's
helps.
there, right? You're building that, again, that
Yeah.
rapport, that
Hmm.
relationship. They're not obligated, because you're not going to say to them, well, I did this for you, so I need you to do this for me. Some people
Right.
will do that. If you got enough power, you can do that. That's what a lobbyist, a true lobbyist,
Right.
has the ability to do. We're not that, right? But you solve that person's problem. You think they're going to be a little more receptive to, one, meeting with you, talking with
Absolutely.
you. And then the other thing, and you brought up a great point that we've neglected to talk about, and this is a tactic I used also. They inevitably have biographies on some website. It might be their campaign
Oh.
one.
Oh
It
yeah.
might
Yeah. Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the state. You want to look that up and look for some common ground. You used military as
Mhm.
an example. There was one I knew was a great golfer. It
Mhm.
was right on his bio that he loved golf, and because they always put some sort of thing in, like, right, to
Right.
make them look human. Well, I went in there and I talked golf for a little bit. You're breaking the ice. You're building that rapport. You're letting them know that you're a human being and you see them as a human being, right?
Right.
Show them the respect and all that, but understand always, because you're going to be nervous the first few times. You inevitably are, but always look at them as they are a human being. They put their pants
Mhm.
on the same way you do,
And
right?
at the end of this life, they're all buried 6 feet under.
Exactly. So all due respect to them, but don't fear them, right?
Right.
There's not a lot they can do to you. There are exceptions. There are some you do not want to piss off.
Right.
Okay. At state level, federal level, and all that, because there are places I've seen guys pick fights with the wrong person. Next thing you know, you got
Right.
the FBI showing up at your door. Okay,
Mhm. That's
because
bad.
if you go and threaten a congresswoman, and this was 20 years ago, I wouldn't even fathom doing it now.
No.
Oh, you're going to be in jail. All right.
Yep.
But this is the mindset that you've got to go in, and trust me. One guy, Curtis is an example, not to toot my own horn, but one guy can make a huge difference, right? And that's
Yes.
where, again, we're trying to build networks. Curtis, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the ebbs and flows of it all. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people who do start lobbying run into is they don't get their way, so to speak, right? Or they get blown off, or they feel like they got blown off, or they're making progress here, but they're not making progress there, and they get frustrated. Kind of talk about how this whole dynamic works, the ebb and flow of it all, how you've got to react, respond, positive, negatives, that type of thing.
So the priority for us has always been, okay, the 50-50 bill it's got to be the priority that we get through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it doesn't matter really if the 50-50 bill gets through the Senate if the House is never going to pass it. So you have to realize that, hey, I'm going to be knocked on my rear end more times than I care to count. And I think you always have to have this Rocky Five scene of him talking to his son in the middle of it, going, doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It doesn't matter any of that. It matters how many times you get up and you still go after it. And you still get after it and you put in the work, because guess what? Nothing is going to come to you just that easy. You know what? Building relationships are easy. Having a good rapport with someone is easy. You want to know why it's easy? Because I can go in and have that conversation with someone. I can follow through with what I said I was going to do. And I can give them results on simple tasks that they're asking me for. Guess what? That's going to give me the opportunity to deliver on something bigger. I'll give you an example. I got asked by a legislator to write an amendment for a bill. He loved this bill, but he wanted one amendment. And he said, look, I just wanted to say this, but I don't have the skills in statutory construction, and I want to be able to put this amendment on file by tomorrow. Can you do that? Yes. I'm going to drop everything I've got right now to make that happen. The problem is people expect that I'm going to have all this success and it, you know what, I'm going to do it differently or whatever. Well, you're not going to do relationship building really all that differently, because guess what? 2 + 2 = 4 is the same as it is in the United States, as it is in Siberia, as it is in a remote island of Madagascar. And it could be, and what is also the same as 2.2 = 4 is human nature. Humans are exactly the same, and it doesn't matter where in the world you go. You can go to a remote island off South America, find some indigenous tribe. Their psychological hierarchies and archetypes are the same exact. Their personalities are the same exact personalities that we all have here. You're going to build a relationship and a rapport with people the same way you would do it anywhere else in the world, and it doesn't matter where in the world you would do it.
Amen to that. It's, I always, when I had people that would start lobbying, two mistakes that they would often make. One, they would think you got to get everything. You got to have the perfect bill, right? So, we were lobbying primarily for shared parenting. There were two things we were targeting: shared parenting and a domestic violence shelter for men. Those were the two things. Right. But people would inevitably say, we got to fix the whole child support system. You're right, we do. But there's not going to be one bill that's going to address everything.
I'm not touching child support
there's
until
no
I
reason
get some other stuff.
Bingo.
Here's the thing. Child support is the red herring. Child support is the one thing that will get everything screwed. Everyone thinks that if you're chasing child support, everyone thinks you're trying to just get out of your child support.
Exactly.
And the thing is guess what? Is child support high in Iowa? Absolutely. We've had two increases, one in January 21 and one in January 22, and they were huge increases. Is that right? In my opinion, no, because guess what? It was based on a percentage of your calculation anyway. Why wouldn't you just keep the same calculation? Well, they paid some economist out of Denver, Colorado, that runs calculations for every other state. Well, that's what they told them that their return would be. Okay. Here's the thing. If you were to really cut down the nuts and bolts of me paying for my kids full time in my house, guess what? On a 1 month, when I have all the boys here and I've got me and my wife, $3,700 a month in groceries.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Sam's Club and Costco love me.
Still love me too. The key point with what Kurtis is saying is pick your battles, right? Mm-hmm. Child support is a key thing. I'm not saying it's not, but shared parenting is the key. You get that first, right? Same thing with the domestic violence shelter. We want to fix all these things with domestic violence. That's fine. In our case, we narrowed it down to we just want one shelter in the state of New York. That's all we're asking for, right? Guys would come in and join and want to do all that. Well, we got to do this. The bill sucks because it doesn't talk about X, Y, Z. The reason it doesn't is because we wrote the bill to make sure none of that stuff was in there. To Kurtis's point, you put child support in a shared parenting bill, that bill has zero chance of ever passing. Once you get shared parenting passed, then your next step is, all right, we're going to address child support, or we're going to address custodial interference, or whatever. Name your battle, right? It's
Visitation
a huge
enforcement.
Yeah, it's a huge elephant. You cannot eat this elephant in one bite. You have to understand that. It's small bites. That's the first mistake people make. The second mistake is they get frustrated and give up. They think it's going to change like that. It's not. It takes decades in some cases. I've been fighting for shared parenting. I'm not in New York anymore, but I spent 20 plus years fighting for it. The same bill that we put out in 2003 is still in every year. The problem is No one's fighting for it right now. There's a group, but they're not doing what we did, right? So we got to the point where, as I talked about earlier, we had 3/4 of the legislature was going to vote for it. We couldn't get it out of committee. And I'm as guilty as anybody. We all got frustrated. I got burnt out because I was spending hours lobbying every week. And I needed to step away. And I did. Nobody picked up the ball from me. The whole group fell apart. And that was in 2008-9. From what I know now, nothing has been done since then. Seriously done. It's a long, slow, tiresome slog, but you have to be prepared for that.
And it's amazing. It's steeply uphill.
Oh yeah, to say the least.
I would tell anyone looking at lobbying for this, there's several strategies that you can approach. A lot of people will say we only need to focus on 1 or 2 issues each year. 50-50 obviously needs to be on the books, and something else such as post-secondary education subsidies being taken off, something like that. There's merit to loading the docket completely full with bills. It can sometimes divide the Bar Association lobbyist focus. Mm-hmm. That's also helpful at times. But I think where a lot of people don't understand is the Bar Association has so much money because they're backed by attorneys that pay their dues and do donate to lobbying efforts inside separately of their dues. It could be a little overwhelming to take on the Bar Association. A lot of times you have to understand that the only way that you defeat money is by electors. So you need to go into those districts where you need to focus and say a farmer who donates $1,000 to this particular representative every single year or every 6 months, hey, did you know that this is what this representative has been voting on and how he views this? Wait, what? Well, that farmer who just gave this guy $2,000 last year, he's like, why am I going to give this representative $2,000 of my hard-earned money when his political views just screwed my son or my grandson out of his custody deal, and they're paying all this money, and he doesn't even get to see his kid, and that kid does not get to grow up on this farm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so
that's how you have a major effect, right? So,
right.
I'll share a situation. I can't get too much into the details, but there is. I'm just going to say North Carolina politician that I am on the periphery of, but they want this person out. This person is about as corrupt as they get. Okay, they have a lot of power, but what you're talking about is exactly how they're approaching it. Right? They're targeting their campaign funding. One. And 2, they're not up for election this year. They're up next year. They're finding that person to primary them, right? With the understanding they're probably not going to beat them in the primary. That's okay. Because they're going to force him to spend a ton of money to defeat that person in the primary. Whereas normally they just walk through to the general and that's it.
Right. It's kind of like that antagonist character in Iron Man 2 where he said to Tony Stark, I didn't need to beat you. I just needed to make a god bleed.
Yep. That's exactly it. Once you do that, now you're starting to show you've got some power and some sway. So you may not this particular person. I mean, I'm not actively involved in them, kind of in the periphery, and I'm aware of it. They're not going to get him out in 25. They're not. But they can scare the crap out of them, right? Number one. Number two, they're laying the groundwork so that in 29, I think it'll be, Because this person's fairly young too, right? They're not going anywhere.
So what I found with certain personality types is they, and I'll tell you that the one representative that I struggle with here in Iowa is kind of in that similar boat. What I found is he he'll back off enough, and he's smart enough to probe the perimeter, right? So he'll call a meeting. He'll say, "Hey, Kurtis, bring in all your guys. How many do you think you'll have there?" And I'm not going to bring all my guys. No way, no how. You're not going to know my real numbers. Exactly, I'm not showing you that. I'll bring in 10 guys, and I'll bring in an assortment of them. And guess what? You'll get to meet them, and you'll think that this is what you have to contend with. Well, he had no idea that all of a sudden things were not quite what he thought. And because I kept the actual numbers silent, he didn't have any clue that, you know what, we actually have a national presence too. Hey, getting an email from Dan from North Carolina for Men to Be Heard actually caught some attention to some folks.
Oh, I'm sure it did, because they replied to me too.
And it was like, you guys got stuff on the national stage. We got people in Indiana. We got people in Ohio. Yeah. We got the national parenting group. You know, everyone. The MPO has been really helpful too. You know, and you get all of these things moving, but with regards to this particular representative, he got emboldened and just dug in. And it was like, okay, so in military terms, do you take on a machine gun nest with an infantry team, or do you just call in field artillery or close air support? I mean, so in my head, the way that I attacked the situation was I wasn't going to attack him head on. In fact, I would still continue to focus on his constituents, and I would send his constituents and the other electors inside his district after him to be like, hey, why are you aligning with so-and-so? Why are you aligned with this attorney who we all know is crooked? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And when you set everything up that way, it gets everyone's attention. And we even at one point had a former legislator thinking about going into his district to primary him, and could get it done because this particular former legislator has the ability to self-fund.
So I mean, really what you're talking about, Kurtis, is projection of power, right?
Yes.
That's ultimately what it is, right? I will tell for those that are listening, they are used to the women's groups, and they are all due credit to the women's groups. I don't agree with what they're fighting for the most part, but they know how to do it. They are masters at all of this.
Yes.
They project power. They don't have the power they used to, but they still project that they do, right? Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, the National Organization of Women, if they wanted to target a legislator, they would just put the word out, and that legislator would get 10,000 phone calls in a day. They had that kind of power from across the country, right? Men's issues don't generate that. I've shared this story before when we were fighting for shared parenting, and this is what ultimately gave us a lot of power. Is we started getting stonewalled, and we knew we were getting stonewalled, so we put the word out. This was pre-email, right? This was fax machines. We gave everybody a fax number. We even wrote what they were going to fax. Send this. We got a phone call later that afternoon begging us to stop.
I remember this story.
Yeah. We emptied the fax machine of all paper. We emptied the ink. We emptied everything. They had over 10,000 faxes come in. That's how we projected power. They were begging us to call off the dogs, and we did, right? Because that's how you project power. And the truth of the matter is, we put a lot of work in to get that done. And it was from
Right.
all over the country. If we just tried to do New York, it wasn't going to happen. Glenn Sachs was involved back in the day. Glenn Sachs was a father's rights advocate, and he was a reporter, and he had his own radio show. He put it out on his radio show. This date, we're doing this, and he supported
Right.
us and got it out there. Those are the type of things that you want to do, but if you're just starting out, that's not your first step. Your first step is build your relationships and all that. It's when you start running into a brick wall, sometimes you got to take the hammer out to knock the wall down.
Yeah,
And that's a way to do it.
Building alliances is important.
It is. And again, that tactic that we used was straight out of the women's groups. So if you really want to understand it, and I have done this, go study the women's groups and their tactics, because they are where they are because of those tactics. And they are brilliant at it. Absolutely brilliant at it. It gives me no pleasure to say that, right? But I'm going to give them all credit because it's due to them. And that's what we as men and those that support men need to start doing, is understanding that, one, we have to start speaking up. We have to do it the right way, and we have to start flexing our muscle properly, I mean, not to go into other politics, but, when January 6th happened, I just went, oh, dear God, no, right? Because look at the damage that's done. It shot down that whole movement for 4 years.
Not just that, but the following that Donald Trump has right now could have a lot more credibility, even
Absolutely,
if that did not happen. And 2024 wouldn't be this big question mark.
Exactly. It would be, the election would effectively be over and done with, right?
Correct.
Because they now have the ability to weaponize that. That's what we're talking about when you don't want to do something like that. You can project power. One of the other ways that we, just to share it quickly, that we were looking at was putting a billboard up outside the New York State legislature. Mm-hmm. They would have had to drive by that billboard every day. We were going to put, we had another guy, he put makeup on that showed he had a black eye, and all the billboard was going to be was a purple background, his picture, and I forget the exact verbiage, but it was something to the effect of, doesn't he deserve help also? Support, support the domestic violence bill, blah, blah, blah. Something like that. Huge, right? Because now they're driving by it every day going, where the fuck did this come from? Now, that billboard was going to cost $10,000. We couldn't raise the money. That's the other side, right?
Well, yeah. I think you've gone over this before, too. I mean, how many dads did you have in New York, and all you needed $1 a dad?
$1 a dad. Set. If every divorced father gave $1 a year, not a day, not a week, not a month, a year, to an appropriate father's rights, men's rights group, you would have shared parenting in all 50 states.
Right. If we had Iowa's population's, 3.3 million, something like that. Mm-hmm. In our divorce population, if we had a dollar from each divorced dad, we'd have $750,000.
What could you do with that, Curtis? I mean, just off the top of your head.
$750,000. Guess
if
what?
that happened, what would happen?
I could flood donations upon legislators to be able to influence a vote. Mm-hmm. Because if you make it through their campaign donations, guess what? It's legit.
Yep. That's one way to do it. The other thing you can do is start media buys. Right?
Oh, yep. And here's the other thing, too. The Bar Association wants to avoid, because they're lawyers, they like to avoid defamation. Well, guess what? The defense to defamation is when you're dealing with politicians, they're members of the government, so there's a lot more latitude there, right? So you can blur the lines. I wouldn't recommend blurring the lines, but you don't have to worry about really telling the truth, really. even if it is damaging and it's maliciously meant to say, hey, guess what? This guy lied on this. He deserves to get out. You can make those statements and you could really impact the public in a positive way. And we could be well on our way to curbing fatherlessness in the home and fixing a huge problem in our society where it has been proven to link to the leading cause of mental health issues and criminality, specifically in men.
The key part of all of that, if you start doing things like we got newspapers to write editorials in support of shared parenting, it's honestly because we were making enough waves to them and saying to them, we could get media buys and stuff like that. It's little things like that. It's exactly what the women's groups do, by the way, right? It's no different. If to use your example, if you had $750,000, I would find some legislator's district that was adamantly opposed, you were never going to turn. There'd be a freaking billboard up, right? I'd be doing media commercials. Yeah. I'd go to TV stations saying, and they'll run it, trust me, because they're desperate for money. I want to run a 15-second ad. It could be something as simple as, you have a kid. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. You have a young kid. I miss my father. Support shared parenting. Something as simple as that, and it would cost about $15,000, and it would run for a month on a local TV station.
So this particular legislator that I really would love to do this to, his district it spans across 3 counties, and because it's rural Iowa, it's always going to be a Republican. So the only way that you would ever go in there and unseat him is another Republican would have to primary him.
Right.
Well, that's not lost on us. But the other thing is if I had $750,000, if it only took $10,000 per billboard, how many billboards along every major highway that went through those 3 counties could I put on there? This representative doesn't support families.
That's all you got to have is your message. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Guess what? It would be like, oh.
That representative would be on the phone to that company going, who ran this? And then you say, call Dan and Kurtis because we're the ones that ran it. You going to listen to us now? Right? It's, again, projection of power. And now they have electronic billboards, which are $1,000 a month. But again, the problem with the men's movement is that we can't even get $1,000 a month, right? If you get out there, if we got some money talks. I'm sorry, guys, if you're listening to this, I get it. You're broke.
Money talks and BS walks, right?
It does, exactly. A dollar is nothing.
Jesse and I's largest donation in 3 years was $500. Oh, and oddly, the $500 came from a gentleman in South Carolina.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. We did a little better than that, but I put up a lot of my own money, and I was fortunate enough that I could do that, and some of the other guys did too, which is why we got as far as we did, because we were putting our own money in. But you look at, off the top of my head, that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20-30 million men who are divorced fathers or were. $1. One freaking dollar, people.
I'll tell you this. My dad would give $100 a month towards something like this. Now that my dad is 65, going to be 66. He would give $100 a month for something like this if it meant changing the law so that kids could have their fathers.
And that's the key point right there, right? Is if you want laws to change, it takes time and it takes money. It takes effort. And, there's people like Kurtis that are doing that. I'm back into it. We're not doing this because we're trying to tout our own horns or pat ourselves on the back. We need you guys to come help us, right? We're one-man armies. We are. We're, to my knowledge, I have tried to make connections in North Carolina. I don't see any group that's doing any serious, legitimate lobbying, right, or advocacy.
Yeah.
There's a few that, well, we're going to go storm the Capitals types. I don't want anything to do with them. I'm not going to be lumped in with them.
No.
But if more people, men, women, got involved, and anybody listening to this, the first step that I want you to do is, one, contribute $1 to someone in your state or Kurtis's group or whoever. I don't want a dime coming my way to help support their initiatives. And two, I want you to pick up the phone and go make an appointment with your local representative, right? Your state senator, your state assemblyman or woman, and go meet with them. That's how you start change. If you don't want to believe that it can work, trust me, look at what the women's groups did, because their power come from doing exactly that. And until we men start doing it, and believe me, there's plenty of women that support us. When we did the analysis on shared parenting in New York, again, 20 years ago, over 80% of the public supports it.
Yes.
It's a no-brainer.
Yes.
But the vocal minority that is opposed to it, which is the Bar Association for money purposes and women's groups for their purposes.
Money.
Child support, right? They only make up about 20%. And nobody likes the Bar Association, so they're not even a factor as far as liking the bill.
How many dads did you run across that would say, you know what, I'll pay you 100% of that child support if you just let me have the kids half time?
Oh, that's a common one.
Come on.
I know of guys that have gotten custody and still paid child support to her. Mm-hmm. And judges that allowed it. Don't get me started there. That's a whole other show too. But it starts with taking action, stepping up. You got to pony up a few bucks. I'm sorry, guys. You're gonna. Yep. I get it. You're paying child support and all that. I'm saying this as a joke, but stop paying for the OnlyFans and take that money and support shared parenting.
Or the daily soda at the convenience store.
If you gave up one soda a month, one Starbucks trip, one can of beer, if you go to stop at the convenient market and grab a 40 on the way home. I've used this one as a joke before. They were like $2 back in the day. I don't even know what they are now. One of those a month.
Yeah.
That's all we're asking. You can afford that, right? If it's a priority, you'll find a way. Mm-hmm. $1 or $2 when you have literally millions of guys going through this will make all the difference in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And it helps guys like Kurtis, myself, and there's many, many, many others out there that are doing this battle to be able to make inroads on it, right? If I can go to a legislator who I know is dead opposed to me and say, my donations are coming in, and you know what? I know you absolutely do not support us. I understand that. I respect that. Just so you know, I'm going to be running some billboards in your district, or I'm going to put a newspaper article in, or I'm going to run a TV or a radio spot or something.
Yep.
Politely, that's how you quote-unquote threaten them, right?
Yes. And the billboards are going to be at these locations because I've already paid for them.
Yep.
And by the way, that all of these social media ads have already been paid for. Here's the invoices as a manner of courtesy, and another thing that I've started getting into is actually taking appellate court cases and started to tear them apart. And it's not going to be very long. We're going to start putting out videos criticizing the appellate level judges,
there you go,
and justices on these court cases, and showing how that's inconsistent with the current law.
That's straight out of what the women's groups used to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, what common tactic they had was family court judges would get bombarded with newspaper articles. So they would, let's say, a guy went and unfortunately killed his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And now would get a bunch of women to go get, they'd go buy 10
Right.
newspapers. They would send it to every family court judge in their area
Mm-hmm.
saying, if only he had a domestic. Now, mind you, he might not have needed one because there never might have been in family court. But they would say, imagine if he had come to your courtroom and you didn't issue a temporary restraining order. That's why they're automatically issued now. That's how you project power, guys. And that's what you need to understand. It's time, money, effort, but it's doing it the right way also. Curtis, we have talked for almost 2 hours already. We got about 5 minutes. We could talk another 2, I know, but got about 5 minutes. What have we missed in that time that we can cover real quick? What other thing that is really important to someone, to try and help someone who wants to get started lobbying or talking about issues with politicians? What's one final thing that you would say?
So for someone, let's say for Bill Corbett,
Mm-hmm.
Bill has been working on getting a domestic violence shelter in Atlanta for some time now. So I do know that as far as like localities and municipalities go, there are federal funds available for some classes, such as veterans
Mm-hmm.
that are homeless, that they'll pay a contractor inside that municipality so much dollars per day to house that veteran. And while it's not like a huge profit, it can be rather lucrative for a nonprofit that didn't have to turn a profit. So I'll give you an example. There's the grant per diem program for the VA. And the VA's grant per diem program, they pay out, it used to be like it was like $1,500 a month per veteran that they housed. And they really only had to provide a minimal like breakfast, and then they had to provide a dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. They had to provide like a bed, a location to sleep, or whatever. And in a lot of communities around the United States, they've gone to these tiny homes for veterans. Well, there's one particular tiny home community in Texas that they've been that has gotten a lot of attention, because at that tiny home, dads could get their kids on the weekends, baby.
Oh, nice.
And I love it, because guess what? A homeless vet that is divorced can have his kids at the grant per diem program that he's at, and they just put up a bunk bed inside their tiny home.
Nice.
And those are the things I love. So that's an example of how the federal government can correspond with the municipal government that's local to be able to get them federal funds to set this stuff up.
That's awesome. I wasn't aware of that one. So, for those that don't know, I've had Bill Corbett, who Curtis just referenced, on this very podcast a few months back. You can go back and look for that, where he talks about the domestic violence shelter for men and helping veterans. The shelter is called Daddy's House. He's got the blueprint that is going to go nationwide. The first one we're trying to get is in Atlanta. Once we get that one, I'm already lobbying for the North Carolina one. It's one of the things I'm working on right now. Okay, yeah. Is getting that in. So once it opens in Atlanta, I want the next one in either Raleigh or Charlotte. All right. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it might be Des Moines, Iowa. Who knows, right? But it takes time. It takes money. I'm already doing the groundwork to get that done. All right. Mm-hmm. That's why if you want to pony up $1, I will put links down below to Daddy's House. You can go do it. You may live in Des Moines, Iowa, or Raleigh, North Carolina, or Anchorage, Alaska, for that matters, right? That dollar still helps a man. And if we get that shelter open in Atlanta, then next one could be your state. It doesn't. I'm saying I'm fighting for Raleigh. You'd be fighting for Des Moines. Whatever. Who cares? Mm-hmm. The goal ultimately is to get one in every single, just one for starters.
Right.
then we'll get more, right?
Yes.
That's how we bring about change, guys. And that's where things like what Kurtis just talked about, I have to find out more about that because I think that's amazing, right? Because I just despise what's happening to our veterans. It's something I'm actually very passionate about. And something like that where you have a dad who's served our country, God knows what some of them have gone through. I know I've talked with guys with horrific experiences, and then they lose their kids at home because they have nowhere to take them. They're homeless and all that. If we can fix that by creating a community like that, and oh my God, that's game changing for the children as well as the dad, right? So this is why, see, now you got me passionate and fired up. You shouldn't have done that, dude. We're trying to wrap things down. You got me fired up now.
We'll go another 2 hours.
Yeah. Kurtis, so unfortunately we do have to wrap up. If someone wanted to follow up with you or follow you on any social media, how can they do that?
You do it on Facebook and Instagram, and I am on YouTube, Kurtis.Bower82. I love YouTube's platform. The reason I love YouTube so much is because you can put up videos and podcasts and it's one of those things where it's really cool. So, and it's Kurtis with a K, by the way.
Well, I will put links down below to all of your stuff. I've already got them from Kurtis, so I have them saved somewhere. I will put links down below. Go follow Kurtis. I'm looking forward to those videos you're talking about too. And understand that this is a long haul battle. I've been at it since 1995, almost 30 years now. Kurtis has put his time in too. You're at what, 10, 12?
I am at 16 and a half.
Okay, I shortchanged you.
Yep.
We need more. We need more, guys. We need that. We need more of you to join us. We need more of you to stand up and share your story, because the more of us that talk about it, the more of us that speak up, the more of us that get in the fight, the sooner things will change. Mm-hmm. One final thought, Kurtis. Go ahead.
Final thought is if you're a dad going through a difficult time, don't let the emotions cloud your judgment. Detach your emotions and focus on the long-term goals of you and your kids from here on out, because the more you let your emotions get in the way, the more it's going to harm you and your kids and everyone's relationship as it is. Remove the emotions from your judgment and make decisions that affect the positive impact for the long-term positive outcomes for your kids.
Amen to that, brother. I couldn't have said it any better myself. So thank you for coming on once again, and of course you'll be on again in the future.
I look forward to it.
I appreciate everything that you do, and I truly view you as a brother and a friend. And we talk behind the scenes quite a bit. It's makes my life better to have you in it, and I want you to know that. So
thank you.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Wow, we covered a lot. Honestly, we just scratched the surface, right? The big takeaway that I want you all to do is you can have an effect, even as an individual, right? Reach out to a legislator in your area, whether it's at the state level, local, federal. State's probably your best bet when it comes to men's issues. Go meet with them. Take an hour out of your life, 1 hour, and go meet with them, and then follow up with them. Pony up that $1 or $2. It will matter. Until we start taking a stand, until we start getting in the fight, guys, and that's the big thing guys have not done. We have not gotten in the fight. We have to get in the fight. It's not for us. It's for our children and our children's children and so on. We can make a difference. Trust me. It's been a struggle at times, but I will go to sleep every night knowing that I've done everything I can to bring about change, and that's all you can ever ask. If you have enjoyed this show, do me a favor, because the social medias aren't the biggest fans of this. Give me that like, give me that thumbs up, share this so it helps spread it with the algorithm. You know how it all works. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I have a new podcast goes up every Sunday at 11 Eastern. And also don't forget, I am live with my partner Lindsay, Squirrely Girl, every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30 Eastern. And Kurtis is more often than not on there chatting away as well. And he doesn't know this yet, but at some point I'm going to have him come on with Lindsay and I live, assuming we don't get banned in the meantime. So go check out the lives as well. On that note, we're going to wrap things up. You all have a great week. We'll see you next week.